Hi, ladybugs. So yesterday, how are you guys doing? Are you guys doing good? I'm doing okay. Yesterday we were dressing Gracie, and I was looking for those shoes, and I found them, so I wanted to show you guys. Here they are. Aren't they cute? And because she's wearing blue and white flowers, I thought they would match this outfit. These are one of those pairs of shoes that doesn't match a whole lot unless you have like solid blue because of the pattern. So I thought they would match this outfit. Let's see if they do. Yeah, we're going to get into reading the story in just a minute. I just wanted to try these on and show you guys some clothes first, and then I'll... Okay, here's the look. I think they look cute. They look like they match the shoes on the pants, the flowers on the pants. Look at little Gracie. In fact, we'll hold her during story time, but I wanted to show you guys some clothes that a friend sent me first. So let's do that. All right. Okay. So she sent me some vintage clothes. We got this toddler dress. Isn't that pretty? Look at the detail. And then we got this little baby dress. And then we got this toddler dress. It's very 80s, I think, that one. And then we got this little pink bonnet. So cute. And then we got this dress. Very cute. And then this one is my favorite that I got, but I think there's one underneath. So yeah, then we got this one. Isn't that cute? Look how pretty. And then we got this one. I think that one's really pretty too. And then we get, this is my favorite, this one. We got this dress. And we got a bib that matches it. Isn't that cute? And adorable little shoes. Look at that. Oh, it's Lion King. I didn't realize that. So anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you guys. Look at the sparkle on the skirt and the butterflies. It's so pretty. So, yep, those are what I got today. All right, let me grab Gracie and we're going to read because it's Friday. I almost did a regular video. I almost forgot that it was Friday and that we were due for chapter 4, Where the Red Fern Grows, chapter 4. All right, let's see. Where are we? Okay, Where the Red Fern Grows, chapter 4. You ready, Gracie? So when we left off, he had ordered the dogs and hadn't heard anything yet. And that, you remember, he saved up all the money in the KC baking powder can and he took it to his grandfather. Yeah, so now he's waiting for the dogs. Day after day, I flew to the store. Grandpa would shake his head. Then on a Monday, as I entered the store, I sensed a change in him. He was in high spirits, talking and laughing with a half a dozen farmers. Every time I caught his eye, he would smile and wink at me. I thought the farmers would never leave, but finally the store was empty. Grandpa told me the letter had come. The kennels were still there and they had dogs for sale. He said he'd made the mail buggy wait while he made out the order. And another thing, the dog market had gone downhill. The price of dogs had dropped $5. He handed me a $10 bill. Now, there's still one stump in the way, he said. The mail buggy can't carry things like dogs, so they'll come as far as the depot in Tahlequah. But you'll have to get the notice here because I ordered them in your name. I thanked my grandfather with all my heart and asked him how long I'd have to wait for the notice. He said, I don't know, but it shouldn't take more than a couple of weeks. I asked how I was going to get the dogs out from Tahlequah. Well, there's always someone going in, he said, and you could ride with them. That evening, the silence of our supper was interrupted when I asked my father this question. Papa, how far is it to Kentucky? I may as well have exploded a bomb. For an instant, there was complete silence. Then my oldest sister giggled. The two little ones stared at me. With a half-hearted laugh, my father said, Well now, I don't know, but it's a pretty good ways. What do you want to know for? Thinking of taking a trip to Kentucky? No, I said. I just wondered. My youngest sister giggled and asked, "Can I go with you?" I glared at her. Mama broke into the conversation. "I declare, what kind of a question is that? How far is it to Kentucky? I don't know what's gotten into that mind of yours lately. You go around like you were lost, and you're losing weight. You're as skinny as a rail, and look at that hair. Just last Sunday, they had hair cutting over at Tom Rollins' place, but you couldn't go. You had to go prowling all over the river and the woods." Oh, hold on. Sorry. Sorry, I had a shooting pain at my back. Sorry about that. I told Mama I had to get a haircut, that I'd get a haircut next time they had a cutting. And I just heard some fellas talking about Kentucky up at the store and wondered how far away it was. Much to my relief, the conversation was ended. The days dragged by. A week passed, and still no word about my dogs. Terrible thoughts ran through my mind. Maybe my dogs were lost. The train had a wreck. Someone stole my money, or perhaps the mailman lost my order. Then, at the end of the second week, the notice came. My grandfather told me that he had just talked to Jim Hodges that day, and he was going into town in about a week, and I could ride with him to pick up my dogs. Again, I thanked my grandfather. I started for home, walking along deep in thought. I decided it was time to tell my father the whole story. I fully intended to tell him that evening. I tried several times, but somehow I couldn't. I wasn't scared of him, for he never whipped me. He was always kind and gentle, but for some reason, I don't know why, I just couldn't tell him. That night, snuggled deep in the soft folds of a feather bed, I lay thinking. I had waited so long for my dogs, and I so desperately wanted to see them and hold them. I didn't want to wait a whole week. In a flash, I made up my mind. Very quietly, I got up and put on my clothes. I sneaked into the kitchen and got one of Mama's precious flour sacks. In it, I put 6 eggs, some leftover cornbread, a little salt, and a few matches. Next, I went to the smokehouse and cut a piece of salt pork. I stopped at the barn and picked up a gunny sack. I put a flour sack inside the gunny sack. This I rolled up and crammed lengthwise in the bib of my overalls. I was on my way. I was going after my dogs. Tahlequah was a small country town with a population of about 800. By road, it was 32 miles away. But as the crow flies, it was only 20 miles. I went as the crow flies, straight through the hills. Although I had never been to town in my life, I knew what direction to take. Tahlequah and the railroad lay on the other side of the river from our place. I had the Fresco Railroad on my right and the Illinois River on my left. Not far from where the railroad crossed the river lay the town of Tahlequah. I knew if I bore to the right, I would find the railroad, and if I bore to the left, I had the river to guide me. Sometime that night, I crossed the river on a riffle, somewhere in the Dipping Springs country. Coming out of the river bottoms, I scadded up a long hodgeback ridge and broke out on top in the flats. In a mile-eating trot, I moved along. I had the wind of a deer, the muscles of a country boy, and the heart of dog love, and a strong determination as well. I wasn't scared of the darkness or the mountains, for I was raised in those mountains. On and on, mile after mile, I moved along. I saw faint gray streaks appear in the east. I knew daylight was close. My bare feet were getting sore from the flint rocks and sawbriars. I stopped beside a mountain stream, soaked my feet in the cool water, rested for a spell, and then started on again. After leaving the mountain stream, my pace was much slower. The muscles of my legs were getting stiff. Pains of hunger were gnawing at my stomach. I decided I would stop and eat at the next stream I found. Then I remembered I'd forgotten to include a can in which to boil my eggs. I stopped, built a small fire, cutting off a thick slab of the salt pork. I roasted it. And with a piece of cold cornbread, I made a sandwich. Putting out my fire, I was on my way again. I ate as I trotted along. I felt much better. I came into Tahlequah from the northeast. At the outskirts of town, I hid my flour sack and provisions, keeping the gunny sack. I walked into town. I was scared of Tahlequah and the people. I had never seen such a big town and so many people. There was store after store, and some of them were 2 stories high. The wagon yard had wagons on top of wagons, teams, buggies, and horses. Two young ladies about my age stopped and stared at me and then giggled. My blood boiled, but I could understand. After all, I had 3 sisters. They couldn't help it because they were women folk. I went on. I saw a big man coming up the street. A shiny, bright star on his vest looked as big as a bucket. I saw the long, black gun at his side, and I froze in my tracks. I had heard of sheriffs and marshals, but had never seen one. Stories repeated about them in the mountains told about how fast they were with a gun and how many men they had killed. The closer he came, the more frightened I got. I knew it was the end for me. I could just see him aiming his big black gun and shooting me between the eyes. It seemed like a miracle that he passed by, hardly glancing at me. Breathing a sigh of relief, I walked on, seeing the wonders of the world. Passing a large store window, I stopped and stared. There in the window was the most wonderful sight I'd ever seen. Everything under the sun, overalls, jackets, bolts of beautiful cloth, new harnesses, collars, bridles. Then my eyes did pop wide open. There were several guns, and one of them had 2 barrels. I couldn't believe it. 2 barrels. I had seen several guns, but never one with 2 barrels. Then I saw something else. The sun was just right, and the plate glass was a perfect mirror. I saw the full reflection of myself for the first time in my life. I could see that I did look a little odd. My straw-colored hair was long and shaggy and was bushed out like a corn tassel that had been hit by the wind. I tried to smooth it down with my hands. This helped, but not too much. What it needed was a good combing, and I had no comb. My overalls were patched and faded, but they were clean. My shirt had pulled out. I tucked it back in. I took one look at my bare feet and winced. They were as brown as dead sycamore leaves. Spiderweb patterns of raw red scratches looked odd in the sandal brown skin. I thought, well, I won't have to pick any more blackberries, and the scratches will soon go away. I pumped up one of my arms and thought surely the muscle was going to pop right through my thin blue shirt. I stuck out my tongue. It was as red as pokeberry juice, and anything that color was supposed to be healthy. After making a few faces at myself, I put my thumbs in my ears and was making mule ears when 2 old women came by. They stopped and stared at me. I stared back. As they turned to go on their way, I heard of one of them saying something to the other. The words were hard to catch, but I did hear one say the word wild. As before, they couldn't help it. They were women folks. As I turned to leave, my eyes fell on my overalls and the bolts of cloth. I thought of my mother, father, and sisters. Here was an opportunity to make amends for leaving home without telling anyone. I entered the store and bought a pair of overalls for Papa. After telling the storekeeper how big my mother and sisters were, I bought several yards of cloth. I also bought a large sack of candy. Glancing down at my... sorry, hold on. My back's really bothering me tonight. Sorry about that. Glancing down at my bare feet, the storekeeper said, "I have some good shoes." I told him I didn't need any shoes. He asked if that would be all, and I nodded. He added up the bill, and I handed him my $10, and he gave me my change. After wrapping up the bundles, he helped me put them in my sack. Lifting it to my shoulder, I turned and left the store. Out on the street, I picked out a friendly-looking old man and asked him where the depot was. He told me to go down to the last street and turn right as far as I could go, and I couldn't miss it. I thanked him and started on my way. Leaving the main part of town, I started up a long street through the residential section. I had never seen so many beautiful houses, and they were all different colors. The lawns were neat and clean and looked like green carpets. I saw a man pushing some kind of mowing machine. I stopped and watched the whirling blades. He gawked at me, and I hurried on. I heard a lot of shouting and laughing ahead of me. Not wanting to miss anything, I walked a little faster. I saw what was making the noise. More kids than I had ever seen were playing around a big red brick building. I thought some rich man lived there and was giving a party for his children. Walking up to the edge of the playground, I stopped to watch. The girls and boys were about my age and were as thick as flies around a sorghum mill. They were milling, running, and jumping. Teeter-totters and swings were loaded down with them. Everyone was laughing and having a big time. Over against the building, a large blue pipe ran up on an angle from the ground. A few feet from the top, there was a bend in it. The pipe seemed to go into the building. Boys were crawling into its dark mouth. I counted 9 of them. One boy stood about 6 feet from the opening with a stick in his hand. Staring goggle-eyed, trying to figure out what they were doing, I got a surprise. Out of the hollow pipe spurted a boy. He sailed through the air and lit on his feet. The boy was the boy was stick marked. The boy with the stick marked the ground where he landed. All 9 of them came shooting out, one behind the other. As each boy landed, a new mark was scratched. They ganged up around looking at the lines. There was a lot of loud talking and pointing and arguing. Then all the lines were erased and a new scorekeeper was picked out. The others crawled back into the pipe. I never had a slide like that at my school, but it would have been pretty cool, wouldn't it? I figured out how the game was played. After climbing to the top of the slide, all the boys turned around and sat down. One at a time, they came flying down and out feet first. The one that was shot out the furthest was the winner. I thought how wonderful it would be if I could slide down just one time. One boy, spying me standing on the corner, came over. Looking me up and down, he asked, "Do you go to school here?" I said, "School?" He said, "Sure, school. What did you think it was?" "Oh, no, I don't go to school here." "Do you go to Jefferson?" "No, I don't go there either." "Don't you go to school at all?" "Sure, I go to school." "Where?" "At home." "You go to school at home?" I nodded. "What grade are you in?" I said I wasn't in any grade. Puzzled, he said, "You go to school at home and don't know what grade you're in. Who teaches you?" "My mother." "What does she teach you?" I said, "Reading, writing, and arithmetic, and I bet I'm just as good as you are." He asked, "Don't you have any shoes?" I said, "Sure, I have shoes." "Why aren't you wearing them?" he asked. "I don't wear shoes until it gets cold." He laughed and asked where I live. I said, "Back in the hills." He said, "Oh, you're a hillbilly." He ran over back to the mob, and I saw him pointing to me and talking with several boys. They started my way, yelling, "Hillbilly, hillbilly." Just before they reached me, a bell started ringing. Turning, they ran to the front of the building and lined up in 2 long, straight lines, and marching like little tin soldiers, disappeared into the school. The playground was silent. I was all alone, and I felt lonely and sad. I heard a noise on my right. I didn't turn around to have to recognize what it was. Someone was using a hoe. I'd know that sound if I heard it on a dark night. It was a little old white-haired woman working in a flower bed. Looking again at the long pipe, I thought, there's no one around. Maybe I could have one slide anyway. I eased over and looked up into the dark hollow. It looked scary, but I thought of all the other boys I had seen crawl into it. I could see the last mark on the ground and thought, I bet I could beat that. Laying my sack down, I started climbing. The further I went, the darker and more scary it got. Just as I reached the top, my feet slipped. Down I sailed, all the way down. I tried to grab onto something, but there was nothing to grab. I'm sure some great champions had slid out of that pipe, and no doubt more than one world record had been broken. But if someone had been there when I came out, I know the record I would set would still stand today in all its glory. I came out just like I went in, feet first, belly down. My legs were spread out like a bean shooter stalk. There's a tongue twister for you. Arms flailing the air, I zoomed out and up. I seemed to hang suspended in the air at the peak of my climb. I could see the hard-packed ground far below. I started down. I shut my eyes tight and gritted my teeth. This didn't seem to help much. With a splatting sound, I landed. I felt the air whoosh out from between my teeth. I tried to scream, but had no wind left in me to make a sound. After bouncing a couple times, I finally settled down to the earth. I lay spread-eagled for a few seconds and then slowly got to my knees. Hearing loud laughter, I looked around. It was the little old lady with the hoe in her hand. She hollered and asked how I liked it. Without answering, I grabbed my gunny sack and left. Far up the street, I looked back. The little old lady was sitting down, rocking with laughter. I couldn't understand these town people. If they weren't staring at a fellow, they were laughing at him. And that's the end of chapter 4. That would be cool to have a slide like that, that goes up to like the top of a building. But, I don't think they would allow that anymore because it was probably dangerous. Like, all the things we used to do as kids, like they used to have the merry-go-round on playgrounds, and they used to have the teeter-totters, and they really don't have those things anymore because many a kid fell off them. So now, they don't want kids to like take any risks. They want them to be completely bubble wrapped and safe, So, it's just not, I don't think it's as fun for kids as today as it was when we were kids, because, when we were kids, we were allowed to take chances. They had those big dome things that you'd climb on, and they had monkey bars, and, remember the metal slides? Like, we would go climb up there. First of all, those steps were like this wide. You could, you constantly were falling off it. But when you got to the top and slid down, especially in the summer, the metal would be so hot, you'd burn up your legs. But, we did it anyway because it was fun. And then, we didn't have all that, AstroTurf stuff, that cushion, ground that they put down now on playgrounds. No, we landed right on the dirt. And it was great. We had, nowadays, everything is so safety conscious, that they don't really allow kids to be kids, and explore and experiment. And I think all of my playground equipment was metal. That's just the way it was. But, nowadays everything's plastic and padded and guarded, and, it's not like it used to be. So I'm excited to use those dresses. They're real pretty. So I can't wait. Gracie says, hi, aunties. There she is. Look at that little smirk. Look at that little smirk. What a stinker, huh? What a little stinker. This was my favorite age for my kids. I think that's why I'm so in love with all my toddlers. This was, when they're babies, they're not as fun. But when they're toddlers, they're a lot more fun. And they're bigger to hold. They feel very comforting in your arms. And that's why I think I like the toddlers the most. So anyway, I have little Gracie in my arms. Huh, girly? And she just fits perfectly snug in my arms. You guys will have to tell me in the comments what's your perfect size baby. I would have to say like Pickle, probably 24 to 25 inches. I mean, Gracie's a good size too. She's 28 inches. But if I had to pick my perfect size, it would probably be the Pickle. And I like anything above like 22 inches. 22 inches and up I like. So it's all good. She's good to go, huh? She enjoyed the story. She's going to be talking about the little boy in the slide probably all week. Let's pull your pants down. They're riding up. But look how cute she looks with these shoes on, with this outfit. Looks so cute. And look, they have little blue ribbons that hold them on. Aren't they adorable? I got these shoes in a toddler size, and I got another pair in a baby size. So I have 2 pairs. Anyway, guys, I'm going to let you run for the night. But I hope you enjoyed tonight's part of the story. And I will see you in the next one. Bye, ladybugs.